How's it going, you guys? My name is Peter Han, and I'm here to give you guys a inside look based on two products that I've received, and I want to give you guys my thoughts and impressions based on my experience as a instructor and also as a professional artist. So what we have today is to look at the Apple iPad and the Surface Pro, and these two hardwares are the newest iterations that have come out this year. And I wanted to give you guys my thoughts based on how they compare from each other, but also how useful they were as, again, a hardware tool, as an artist tool. So the first one I'm going to deal with is the Apple iPad. I want to give you guys a couple of thoughts. I'm going to put this one down first. Now, just to give you a bit of insight, obviously I am an instructor at the Art Center College and several other schools here in LA. And I also am a working professional as a freelance contract artist, working on multiple projects whenever I can get them, and a lot of personal projects for myself, doing self-publishing for books and comics and whatnot. So up to this point, most of my tool sets have been analog tools, sketchbooks, pens, pencils, and also on the digital side, Photoshop and my personal computer. This is my first time really getting into the use of tablets and small mobile devices like the iPad, and I've had these devices now up to this point for 5 months, since about January of this year. Now, I wanted to make sure I gave enough time, investment to actually using it day to day on both ends as an instructor and as an artist to see real deeply as to how I really felt about these products. And I will give you guys my insights and thoughts and experiences, and these again are only thoughts and experiences. So please don't take it as, this is what you should do, what you shouldn't do, this is what you should get or don't get. Obviously, the more videos you watch, you'll get more information and experiences from other artists and people to give you a general idea as to which path to take, as which product would be best suited for your lifestyle or your working industry. For me, of course, I have worked in many industries, from entertainment design to fashion, illustration, mural work, advertising. So at the end of the day, I've dealt with a lot of different fields in creative industry. But overall, it came back down to my skill in communication and sketching and drawing. Now, for the longest time, I was looking for a device to really help me streamline the process to be able to communicate and draw. So my first impression was to go for the iPad. Now, I've been working with Microsoft as well too, and I was working with the Office team, helping out, just doing some user experience and impressions based on some of their hardware, and they sent me the new Surface Pro. So I'm going to give you guys, again, thoughts on that device as well too. Now, I do have conclusions based on both products. I'm going to tell you how I feel about them. Both do have their uses, and both do have their strengths, but also have minor weaknesses within them, and they're minor in actuality. No matter what direction you go in, I believe you're still going to benefit from both products. So I would say, if you get a chance to play with them, have actual experience within yourself by using a friend's or going to a storefront and actually testing it out, and hopefully make a good decision at that point. So we'll start with the iPad first, and I'll give you guys a little bit more general information from there. I'm going to cut in some video shots and also some images based on the experience of having been used on location, and we'll go deeper into then the thoughts behind it. All right. Okay, so we're going to dive right into the iPad Pro, and we're going to talk a bit about specifics here as to what this device entails. Now, to give you guys some general information about which one I am using, this is the 12-inch version out of the two. The other one is a 10, and I wanted to give you guys the comparison notes based on the two, because I have handled the 10-inch version of it, and though being lighter and smaller, more compact, for myself personally, I would gravitate more towards a larger version of things, mainly because of the larger real estate of the screen, and also for more control based on some of those pixels and more details of drawing that I want to go for. The smaller version, I think, would have its use for people that might be on a bit of a budget, or if they want something a bit more mobile on the go, especially if you do a lot of traveling. I would still recommend that particular piece. Now, here's the thing about the iPad also, based on the app that I'm using. This current generation, as powerful as it is, the previous generations are actually just as good running the basic apps that we need to be creatives, or whether you're a designer or an artist, whatever the case is. So don't feel like you have to get the best and the newest one. As ideal and powerful as this one specifically is, the older generations are still quite nice, and you would save a lot more money going for previously owned or previous generations of the iPad Pros. So obviously I have the pencil, the Apple Pencil with me as well too. And Apple, thank you for them for sending it to me. I've been working with the VP of Marketing. I've also been working with Procreate to set me up with these devices so I can kind of explore and give them information and feedback based on my own experience, and of course based on the experiences of other people I've been sharing with. I've been kind of asking a lot of questions to friends and students to give me thoughts based on their own impressions going into this device, where some of them do have these. First things first, obviously this is the iPad. I have a very simple screen cover on top of this. We'll go into the actual screen now and take a look at the device itself. Now, you might not be able to see it very clearly, and I'm not really going to show you more details just yet, because I'm going to show you guys videos cut in with demos and such that shows you the control of how the iPad really works. But out of this entire screen, let me actually just bring down the brightness and see if we can get it a little bit better off to the camera, and that should work a lot better. So as you can notice, on the iOS we have obviously the standard swiping left and right to get you access on all the apps. Now the main program, or the main app that we're going to be talking about and getting into, is Procreate. Now Procreate, I was able to meet the guys who run this company when I was at Poland last year, just visiting and doing a workshop and lecture. A lot of fun to be able to interact with those people, to be actually surprised in the fact that I can meet these guys and have more intimate interactions and talks about their device and also about their program, their apps. So never really having any experience prior to that, which was in last November. I wanted to kind of get a little bit deeper into it. So we kind of struck up this conversation about how I can give them information and feedback after I've used it for myself. And we all thought it was a good idea, and to be able to kind of share as much as possible based on my own experiences is something that they like to do quite often. So at this point is where I wanted to really get into it. Obviously I've been using it now for a couple of months. We have a couple of files in here, illustrations and sketches, and I'll definitely show you guys in more in detail as we get into it. Before we get into Procreate, I just want to talk about the iPad first. The iPad in general, a couple things. First, the screen quality is very nice. The resolution, very high, and I think it holds up very, very well. The brightness is easily controllable. Outdoor areas, I'm able to still see what's going on. Unless you have a very extreme glare that would kind of reflect off the screen that you can't really see anything going on, then of course you might want to get into a shaded area to adjust for that. But in general, it does work fairly nicely. Indoors, best place to use it, obviously. But in terms of anything else, the actual glass of the screen, of the surfacing, I didn't have any kind of cover on top of this. There was no protection initially. I went by Apple's recommendations, which is to use the glass directly with the Apple Pencil. Now, at first, I just kind of tried using it over time to see if I would get used to it, but I would honestly say that the glass to me was not that comfortable or ideal for me when it comes to drawing or painting. When it came down to it, the feeling of it, when I would touch the glass, draw on top of it, whatever the case was, it just didn't feel very intuitive. It just didn't feel natural. There was no analog feel towards it. It was very slippery. It scratched a little bit here and there. The glass, even though it's very, very tough, started to accumulate small micro scratches or abrasions. And over time, now even though you wouldn't really see it, so the glass held up fairly well, but the problem is you would feel it. And whenever the pencil would kind of catch these small little nicks, it would skip, and you would feel that. It wasn't ideal for drawing, especially when you're on location and you're focusing on what you're trying to do. I didn't want anything hindering my experience on that. So the glass, I eventually got a cover on it. The cover screen protector that I'm using is from a company called Paperlike, which you guys are welcome to Google and take a look at. Imported over from Germany, I believe. But the quality of the cover is quite nice. It makes it actually feel like paper. The sound of it is also quite nice too. But in general, that was a third-party thing I wanted to add on top of the iPad. So as you can notice, just me kind of playing around with a few lines and whatnot. I'm using this 6B pencil from the sketching section of the tab, and it works fairly well. This is pretty actually my only go-to brush that I really use for drawing. There are some other inking and sketching tools, but in actuality I mainly just use this one. So I haven't really customized anything. I haven't really added any kind of additions to this. It's pretty much the stock version of what everything is going for, because I didn't want to add too much to it. I wanted to make the experience pretty much what anybody else was going to go through in the beginning. So that was one of the issues, was the glass. I put a cover on there, felt a lot better. The weight is okay. This is the 12-inch version. I've been carrying it in my satchel for long periods of time. I would travel internationally as well too, and so far I would say that the weight of it is actually not hindering my experience. The 10-inch version I'm sure would be even lighter. So on the weight side, I'm not really too I don't have anything negative on that side. The heat can accumulate over time, and you can feel it off of the screen, and you can feel it off of the back of the iPad. So it does get a little bit hot on the metal, and especially if temperatures outside, if it's really warm outside, it can start to even increase heat even further. I have noticed the battery does get affected by cold, extreme cold. So if you're outdoors and it's 30 below, not 30 below, but 30 degrees or below, it's gonna affect the battery where it drains it a little bit faster. But yeah, those are small little minor things in terms of gripes. The battery does hold up fairly well though. In terms of specifics of the battery, in general, standard, kind of indoor use, everyday use, I would say it's held up very, very nicely. The only downside in terms of the iPad is the battery. The charge time does take quite a while. So I would always recommend charging it the night before and then having it ready to go on the day. So besides that, the battery can last me easily a whole day with extra charge left to go further for the next day if I need to. And this is just with heavy amount of use of actual drawing on site and painting in-house. So I have now used this for two different directions, educationally and also professionally. What I want to share with you guys is a couple of images and files and videos of drawings that kind of show you a little bit of approach as to what I'm doing. Now, many of these sketches and drawings I am doing on location. I'm going to the museum, we're going outdoors, and we're actually observing these things and drawing live. The reason why I've been using the iPad and why I wanted to go for it a little bit more was because of, as a teaching device, it was extremely beneficial to communicate to others. Now, the big problem was that back in the day when I was doing a lot of sketching in paper, which I still do, but for classes and sketchbooks, was that I would draw, but many people couldn't see what I was doing. In a classroom full of 20 people, maybe 10 or less could actually see what I was demoing. I would hold up my sketchbook, but again, they wouldn't actually see the process of me doing it. That's a big problem. So I thought about what I could do to help remedy that particular problem of communication. So the iPad kind of solved that particular problem. With the iPad itself, I was able to at least draw on my own time while people were drawing with me as well too, and the iPad with Procreate was able to then record my sketches and drawings. Now, of course, a huge benefit of Procreate was the actual time-lapse replay, where after I finished a sketch and a drawing, I could gather everybody together, I could show them the screen in front of me, and I could replay the entire drawing and explain every step of the way and hold it in each section. So that to me again was extremely crucial as a communication device. Very helpful for people too. Not only that, after I've shared the images, I would then be able to literally share it on social media. So I can save it as a JPEG, PSD file, PDF files, TIFF files, whatever the case is, whatever you needed. Generally the typical file types are there, which all you're really going to need. So I would then share the JPEGs and whatnot onto Facebook or onto Instagram, and people would then be able to go there live in the moment after I've done the demos and watch it again or look at those images and download them onto their phones as they're going for the rest of the class. So I found that extremely beneficial. So if I saved out, let's say, any kind of file size, I would be able to save the image directly to the iPad. I will be able to export it onto a Dropbox platform. And so the shareability was pretty streamlined and easy to use. I was paying for a mobile network for the iPad, 4G, so that I would be able to upload things on the fly, on location, without a Wi-Fi network. And of course, being able to share both file sets of images and videos was extremely helpful. Now the big downside was this. Sharing things were fine, but the control, the limitations of it were a little bit there. Based on the fact that if I wanted to do a time-lapse replay and export this video, I can't necessarily control the speed of this video. So the speed of it was relatively quick, and especially if I did a small 10-minute sketch, the time-lapse replay would be just maybe 10 seconds. So because of the speed of it, many people can't really, I guess, harness the information based on the steps that I was actually doing for drawing. So I wish there was actually a way to control the speed of the replays a bit better. Maybe I just didn't discover it just yet. Maybe I'll find out at some point in the future. Maybe that option doesn't exist just yet. But so far up to this point, I haven't really enabled that or have looked into it. I just use a standard approach as what Procreate offered me, and I've found that the replay videos are all pretty much the same. So that was one of the issues and problems that I had about this as a teaching device, is that I could not control the speed, about how much the quickness of the demos that were replaying back and forth, whether it was done through live or an exported video. So other than that, the demoing process worked out fairly well, and students reacted to it very positively. So my impression so far was, as a teaching device, it was excellent. It was very, very good. I also then bought an external adapter for HDMI cables, which I could connect to a projector. In class, people could then watch what I was drawing if I was demoing, and it, again, in class sessions worked out fairly well. So many of the students gave me a lot of positive feedback. A lot of them thought it was very helpful for them to be able to actually have access to the images, to the file sets, to the videos, and so that they can have further use for it into the future. Beyond this, that's just pretty much on the Procreate level. I don't really have anything else to share based on Procreate other than the fact that as a teaching device, it was really good. I have used it for professional use and self publishing or self projects as well too. Whether I'm doing rendering, practices on painting using photographs and images, or I'm doing studies off of films or going on location again to draw. For personal use, it was extremely gratifying and very, very helpful. So as an overall experience, the iPad has been a very positive one. I would definitely recommend this to a lot of artists that are using it more for just personal use, and definitely even for professional use. The one thing I've gotten from feedback from professional people, friends, is that they've kind of felt like the device didn't really give them the power of what Photoshop offered in terms of the rendering techniques that they would want to do for painting. Well, obviously with time, with more investment of skill, you would be able to get, I believe, your files or your images and paintings to a similar quality that you can get from Photoshop. But of course, many people have been using the same programs for many number of years, and they're very used to that one little thing. So I would say a lot of this is also based on the factor of time. The more time you invest into it, the more you'll get out of it, the actual thing too. So beyond that, if anything else on the iPad, the hardware that I want to talk about is the pencil has a few minor specifics that I could want to change. One is a bit of the weight. Right now, just holding it is not that bad, but over time, it does get just a little bit heavier where you can actually feel the weight on top of your fingers. Now, of course, getting some kind of grip can alleviate the pressure problems, but I do feel it's a bit back-end heavy. Also, the design, which connects from Lightning to the back of the iPad, inserting it to charge the iPad pencil, has a lot of problems in the fact that it's sticking out and has this potential to break that joint in connection. So not a very good thing to have that there. Now, of course, you can get an adapter with a cable to attach into, so that's fine, but that's just more stuff to carry. What's the solution to it? Well, I don't know. I think having an extender where this has an internal wire that you can pull out would be kind of interesting, maybe. But that's definitely just a small minor gripe on the pencil itself. So not too much that's really hindering the experience, but it does kind of stand out every now and again. When I'm walking around on location, the Apple Pencil runs out of battery, and I'm walking around with this thing sticking outside the iPad. It feels a bit dangerous to be able to hit things or kind of break it. So I'm sure many people who've used it before have a similar thought and experience. That's pretty much the overall impression of the iPad Pro. It's relatively going to give you everything you need, and I would say out of the two, this one is going to give you the most intuitive, the most on-the-go, super quick setup, just pick up and play effect that you're going to get from any kind of hardware. The cost obviously can be relatively high based on what you're looking for. Procreate itself, very cheap. So I would say in the long-term run, you're definitely going to get a lot of your money's worth from this product of hardware and also software on both ends. So big recommendations when it comes to iPad Pro. Let's jump over to the surface and see what we can get from that. Alright, so I want to share with you guys the Surface Pro, and this is one made by Microsoft, sent to me sometime late last year, probably December, November of 2017. I've had this now again for about 5-6 months, and being able to now play with it on different levels, again as an educator and as a professional artist. So here we have a device that did come together, which was with the keyboard that sandwiches as a protector. It does have a back stand where you can then kind of raise it up and treat it like a laptop. It does have its own stylus, which magnetically connects to the hardware. Worked out fairly well. In terms of the device's build, pretty high quality. I do like it quite a bit. It's pretty rigid. I like the materials. It feels pretty good. This is a stylus. It's got a little clicker on the back end for the eraser. It's got a small little, much like the stylus pens of any type, will have small little clicker buttons at the front end section. The nibs are replaceable. And again, the quality in the build of it feels pretty good. In comparison to the Apple Pencil, I would say this beats it out in terms of weight. The pressure sensitivity, obviously not as good. It is better than the previous generation of the Surface Pro. So this was one of the improvements of the Surface Pro, was that I believe this now has 8,000 pressure points, from what I understand. Or yeah, I think that was 8. Anyways, I'll look into it and see if we can correct that if we need to. But I believe it is 8,000 pressure points. We'll take off the cover, which is also magnetically connected, and we have now just the Surface Pro. As we click it on, as you'll notice, it does run Windows 10, and the device is pretty much a full-fledged computer. It does have a tablet mode, but I do believe it's a great use as a computer. Let me unlock it real quickly. There we go. And it does give you the option for tablet mode if you need it. Now, the stylus obviously is interactable with all the parts and pieces on here. It's also touch sensitive, so you can use your finger to touch the screen. Much like the iPad, I want to talk about just basic hardware information. I can actually even bring up some specs here, if we can find it. We are currently using a device that has 16 gigs of RAM. This does run an Intel Core i7 processor at 2.5 gigahertz. This is using the 64-bit operating system of Windows 10, and it does support pen and touch for the tablet. So 16 gigs of RAM is quite a bit. And in actuality, probably a lot more than you'll need if you're just kind of running simple things like Photoshop and whatnot. Now, for some others that might be considering using it for maybe modeling programs and such, then having obviously a much beefier machine like this one will be quite helpful. I do want to adjust the screen and display real quickly. See if we can make it show up better on the actual camera. So it is pretty much a full-on computer. It does have a tablet mode, like I said. You can change it out at the bottom section on the right. But we're going to keep this to just actual Windows 10. All right. Now, I haven't uploaded, or not uploaded, but installed any programs really. I have installed Photoshop on this before, and it did run it pretty smoothly. The issue with Surface Pro and Windows 10 at this scale is also the high resolution screen, is that the UI on Photoshop would have a hard time adjusting here and there. I was able to get it working, but I kind of stripped off everything, and I wanted to just kind of run one program to show you just the capabilities of the pressure and whatnot. We're going to use Autodesk Sketchbook. And as a mobile device to sketch and draw, I would say it also is pretty capable of being able to handle speed, pressure, file sizes, and whatnot. Now, Autodesk, does require a subscription. I'm not really going to talk about the program because I haven't really delved too deep into it. I would actually mainly use Photoshop CC on this particular device. Plenty of power, enough, potential to be able to run those programs. But this is just to practice out and see the quality of line and the pressure sensitivity, which again does hold up fairly well. Light little touches is able to catch small little lines. And again, there's a lot of customization that you can do because it is Windows 10. So you have a lot of openness to be able to control and customize anything you want to, whether it's in the stylus or in the screen, the device's reaction to you. So what about some general information? Well, the Surface Pro is a little bit heavier on the heavier side. In comparison to the iPad, again, we'll put them together at some point. It's a little bit smaller, but the weight almost feels equal to it, if not just a few bits heavier. And it can be noticeable over time. I've held it in my bag, I've traveled with it internationally, and again, the weight does accumulate over time. And again, it's not drastic and it's not to the point where it takes it away from it, but it is noticeable. The screen, the glass, I do like quite a bit. There is no protector on this one, but because the nib has a little bit of a softer rubber to it, it doesn't necessarily scratch into the glass. So I haven't really necessarily required a screen protector on this thing. But so far, other things based on my experience, the battery life relatively holds pretty well. I think in similar cases like the iPad, after a full days of use, most of the battery will be drained. If I'm using it from morning till night, the battery will pretty much take a big hit. So you'll definitely need to do a charge up overnight to be able to get it going again the next day. Charge is relatively slow as well too. It does take a few hours to get full charges. So again, keep things plugged in overnight if you can, and that way the next day you'll be ready to go. I have used this in cafes, I have used this in a class, and so far my experience based on that, again, a smooth experience because now it gives me the full capabilities of a computer of Windows 10, but there are a few things, limitations beyond it. One, I feel like this is a much better device as an actual replacement for your computer. I've noticed that I was actually doing a lot more everyday, day-to-day computer, email sending, Photoshop work of painting a little bit here and there, adjustments on images and whatnot, sending file sets, being able to customize whatever projects or things that I'm working on to be able to handle those files. So as an actual device, I was actually using it more of a sit down at a cafe, at a table at my house to actually work with like an actual computer. So I found myself less taking it on location to actually draw with, because the thing is, drawing on location, you're limited based on, comfort of movement, placement, the amount of keys you have access to, and in Photoshop, and particularly if you are drawing in Photoshop, a lot of those keys are not easy to access if you don't have, let's say, a keyboard in front of you. And that was one of the main flaws, was that if I'm standing and drawing with this particular device, it's really hard to just change a bunch of things, to be able to jump into, copy and pasting and stuff like that, or importing images, anything I needed to access for the UI of Photoshop. It just was a little bit hard to just kind of fumble around with. Now, of course, if everything is set, I just need to draw with things. Relatively pretty simple. Painting it, a little bit harder to do, because to affect things like brush sizes and choosing all the stuff that you need to have, again, there are a lot of limitations. And then there was the actual stylus itself. The stylus, as good as it is, and again, you can see it does have a fairly good level of control, it's still not as good. Not as good as actually using, let's say, like a Wacom Cintiq or a tablet, and even in comparison to the iPad. The pencil just has a little bit more sensitivity to it. So I would say that's definitely one of the bigger drawbacks. Another part of the problem was that this device came a little bit faulty. I'm using it right now, and the reason why I've stripped all the programs is because I'm planning to send this back. I want to send it back because I want them to be able to repair it. I think there's a couple of issues right now that's not necessarily the fault of Microsoft or the device. I think it's just the fact that I just had a faulty one. So it did crash a lot. I got the blue screen to death pretty much twice a day, and that's if with any kind of heavy use. And right now with this simple program going on, I don't think I'll have any problems, but if I was running Photoshop, I'm pretty sure it would have crashed by now. So like I said, if you do ever get a faulty version of it, if it does crash several times in a day, I would say right then and there, send it back and get a replacement, use your warranty, whatever the case is. It kind of grew worse over time. In the beginning, it didn't really crash as much, but over time it started to really, I started to notice a problem. This could be due to Windows 10, but I couldn't even do a fresh start on this thing. I can't go back to the very factory restart on this. Windows just is broken on it. But again, I think that's just the part of the problem of having a full-fledged computer, is that there small little things can go wrong. In any case, as you'll notice, again, it's great as a device to be able to use as a presentation tool for any kind of setup mobily when you're actually working on a mobile office. So with all those programs installed with a smooth running hardware, I would definitely recommend this more as a replacement computer to do everyday, day-to-day use. So let's bring these two together and talk about them in comparison. Okay, so we have the two devices now right next to each other. Here is our Surface Pro, here is our iPad. And of course, both programs, not programs, but hardwares, do look very, very pretty. So as an actual build quality, they're extremely nice. You can see the size difference between the two. The Surface Pro is ever so slightly smaller in comparison. In terms of thickness, you can see that the iPad is much thinner than the Surface Pro. There is also a lot more hardware here though, so that is something that I can't necessarily gripe about because of the fact that we have something here that's much more of a machine of a computer. So you can see why this machine over here on the left, the Surface Pro, will be just a bit heavier because of that. We can see the stylus in comparison. Apple Pencil much longer, stylus a little bit shorter over here. The diameter pretty similar, I would say, but in terms of weight, actually they're pretty comparable. There's a bit more back end heaviness to the Apple Pencil still. Stylus again has a few more buttons and such to be able to use, but I actually rarely ever use those buttons. Again, this one also does come with a battery on the inside of it, which you have to replace at some point. This is rechargeable, so big benefit over here to the pencil. As you'll notice again, in terms of the impressions from a distance, people probably wouldn't be able to tell what is what, but I would say as a user, I'm going to give you guys now kind of a last couple thoughts and impressions on things. First and foremost, the iPad Pro is definitely more of an artist's hardware. So if you're looking to draw, looking to sketch, looking to paint, openly, on site, at home, from studies, as a student or professional, the iPad Pro is the direction that I would focus on, mainly because of its usability, its ease of use, its strength within its strong OS, the quality of the build, the fantastic screen, the resolution being very high, and of course the strength of the app, Procreate. And I think if Procreate did not exist on iPad, the iPad Pro would have failed. I probably would have gone more to the Surface Pro, having access to Photoshop. So having Procreate is a huge plus for Apple, and that's really a huge part of the breaking in the back essentially for any other tablet. There's really no point to go to them because Procreate itself is such a powerful program. It's easy to use, it has its own strengths, it's transferable to programs and files to Photoshop and whatnot. So again, a lot of user-friendly aspects of things, and that's pretty much the way it's always been when it comes to PC and Windows. Surface Pro, would I still recommend this? Absolutely, mainly because it's a great replacement for a laptop or a mobile computer. Obviously you can't replace a standalone tower, but as a computer tablet, it's very powerful. 16 gigs of RAM, an i7 processor in this thing, great video card, extremely good size for it, the weight, and also what it's capable of doing. You install all the programs you needed to go for, and it's good to go. It's a fantastic machine for that. So that's why I would definitely still use this machine on my end. In actuality, I probably would end up owning both of these because I actually don't have a tower. I use a laptop. I have a larger 17-inch Lenovo laptop, and it's heavy, very, very heavy. So I don't like taking that into classrooms. I've actually taken this into classrooms to do demos, and it's worked because it has connection to USB, which I have now an adapter, which I can connect the HDMIs, sending it to a projector. So both have that capability. But this I would use more for educational communication, for sketching and drawing. This I will be doing demos for like full-fledged painting or demos on Photoshop, file creations, bigger files to work with. Computer, that's pretty much what I would use it for. That's the separation between these two. Prices are comparable, honestly. You're gonna hit about 2K plus. But like I said, it's more about the functionality and the use of where they go. And for me, that's how I'm separating them at the moment. And so if you're looking for a machine, ask yourself more what your function and priorities are. Are you looking for a device to help you draw, paint, more of a kind of intuitive device? Then the iPad probably is where you want to go. If you're looking for a replacement computer that can still run Photoshop really well, to be creative on it, to be able to draw and paint with a tablet, this is where you obviously would want to go also. So again, like I said, based on where you stand, what you currently need is where you're going to want to put the money into and invest your time. For me right now, if I was to choose one or the other, if I only had to choose one, my choice actually probably would be the iPad. And the only reason why is because I have a computer. I have Photoshop at home running with Cintiq, and the Cintiq is a fantastic device which has a much better pressure sensitivity than the Stylus that we have here. And I think the one thing that does hold it back is the Stylus. The pressure sensitivity is not as strong. So because of it, I can't get the level of quality that I want out of this, unless I'm using a tablet connected to it, which I have done before. But even then, I would want to be able to draw directly on top of the screen, and it just doesn't have the level of control that I would need to get the finesse and the subtlety, drawing wise, painting wise, that I would want in my paintings or drawings. Whereas the iPad is very comparable to the devices from Wacom, Cintiq, and tablets, which I feel are very, very strong. In combination to Procreate, pretty much pushes it over to the edge on that side. So those are my thoughts, and those are how I feel about these two particular hardwares. And if you guys have any questions, comments, in terms of corrections of things that I may be mistaken based on what I've said, please do correct it. I'd love to hear more about your guys' thoughts and experiences as well too. Keep in mind the fact that, again, as a reminder, this is just my experience. It's just the way I've entangled with these pieces of hardware. Both of them have been fantastic, and I do want to thank Apple, those people in Procreate as well too, and also from Microsoft and the Office team to be able to share with me their products, and so I can just do a video like this one and have the benefits to be able to play with programs and hardwares like this. In any case, if anybody else has any comments and thoughts, do reach out, do comment, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. If anything else, at some point in the future, if I do run into any other hardwares, devices, tablets, we'll probably try to do more reviews of them, and we'll see where things go from there. All right, so enjoy, do play with them at some point in the future. I hope you guys will have your own experiences and make your own videos as well too. I'd love to see what you guys think thoughts are. In any case, thank you for joining in, and we'll talk to you next time. Appreciate it.